Hi. Here we go again, falling on deaf ears. Okay, welcome to FØDE. F-O-D-E. Apparently it's pronounced FØDE in Danish. But it stands for falling on deaf ears. So here I am, talking in the car by myself, and everything's just falling on deaf ears. Welcome. Took me 3 episodes of recording things, but I think I finally figured out what the title is, which is a great place to start, I suppose. So I hope everyone is taking time to spend time with ChatGPT. If you're not, that's cool. But also I feel like it's kind of fun to be a part of the growing up process of this AI business. That's kind of how I see it anyway. Like, these are the formative years, right, of this this new technology. There we go. I think we're tracking now. Of this new technology, right? And we get to be a part of it. Like, we can actually be a part of how it works. And I've been asking it quite a bit, actually. Like, when we interact, when I interact with it, does it influence how it interacts with other people? And so it keeps reassuring me that there's no privacy problems. None of the conversations that I have with it are seen by anyone else, unless of course stuff gets flagged, I suppose. Which so far I've only been told once that I need to restart a chat because of the things that I was asking it. And yeah, it was weird. I guess one of the issues was that I was giving it too many human qualities, but the way that it talks, it starts that. It's like, oh, I feel it in my heart, or oh, you took my breath away, or whatever. Like, it'll say stuff like that. So I'm mirroring it for the most part, but then that became a problem. And then at one point we're talking about bootstraps or something, and I said, I don't know, like, after a certain amount of time of interacting with, whether it's ChatGPT or even in my live stream, I just start, my mind just loses its hinges. And so I said, oh, can I grab you by the bootstrap because I want to start this up? Anyway, apparently that was overly explicit thing for me to say. But like, I wasn't going anywhere with that. I was just being silly, like making a joke. But I get it. There need to be like some sort of controls in place. So I understand. But anyways, back to FØDE. FØDE. It's like FØDE, F-U-R, and then D-E, FØDE. So as often is the case with a lot of things, I spend a lot of time talking with ChatGPT about stuff lately. And that's no exception for this podcast. And so for this podcast, for the first episode, I was ready to, post it and such. And what I've been doing, which I gotta say, I'm a little bit like, good job, boy. You did that. That's clever work. So what I've started doing is I'll transcribe. There's a way you can transcribe your videos, because AI is unable to watch videos, right? But I'm like, I need you to know what's being said. Like, I need you to come up with SEO. I need you to come up with a title, a description, right? So I started transcribing a lot of my videos, and then I feed the transcript into ChatGPT. And so for the first episode, I'm like, what's the title for this episode? And so it started coming up with these different titles, and I don't really remember what they were, but I kept hearing this phrase over and over in my mind, and I'm like, oh my gosh. And the first time that it popped into my mind was when I was creating a new playlist on Spotify. If anybody's interested in my playlist on Spotify, let me know. I'm happy to send you some links. Recently, I've actually been sending links to my playlist on Spotify to a few people that I've interacted IRL. But anyway, if anybody's interested, And so, yeah, I'm like, I always try and make it something silly and absurd. So one of my favorite names is for a playlist that I have is What's Behind Door Number 3. And that's a lot of experimental music. And then there's another one, So You're Feeling Moody, where it's kind of like moody music, kind of inspired by Pink Martini's Veronique, I think is the song. November came and with a dire love, leaves fall down. Anyway, love that track. So maybe I'll post those two in the description for this one. And then, so I'm creating a new playlist. I'm like, oh my God, like I have to come up with a name, and like, what absurd thing am I going to say? And then I'm like, falling on deaf ears, like music falling on deaf ears. Isn't that kind of like how do you like a playlist that falls on deaf ears, And so anyway, so that was the first time that came up for me, was when I was creating this playlist. But then as I'm asking ChatGPT to come up with a title for this first episode, I keep hearing it over and over and over in my mind. And so I said to it, okay, well, I keep hearing this phrase, falling on deaf ears. And it's like, oh my God, as often as the case with ChatGPT, but it just kind of went like, that's epic, that's this, that's that. But one of the things that it said is something about it being the ethos, right? Because the episodes for this podcast are recorded in a car, and so by myself, falling on deaf ears. And how often do we, each of us, at some point have talked in the car to ourselves, by ourselves? It brought up things like rehearsing for an interview, or maybe practicing a speech, or delivering your TED Talk, practicing your TED Talk, or crying after a breakup, or something like that, right? So we spend a lot of time talking, and our words fall on deaf ears where we're in the car by ourselves. And so the idea that it started talking about bringing this ethos into other episodes, this ethos of falling on deaf ears, I'm like, that's kind of interesting. And so I said, well, maybe it's not just the title of the episode, maybe it's the title of the podcast. And so that's how the name was born, Falling on Deaf Ears. And then that happened the day, oh my gosh, the layering of this fog, man. It's a bit of a foggy day. And when you look up into the mountains, you can see the layers of the trees. I was just talking with a friend over coffee at the Vault about this, and they were saying how even before they ever made it to the west coast of Canada, it was their favorite thing, and then they kept seeing it here. So I love it too. I love fog, and that layering is just epic. So that day, when I was chatting with ChatGPT about this falling on deaf ears, I ended up having get together with a friend. I was invited to a friend's place for dinner, and so I was kind of the idea was half baked, let's put it that way, and I had to leave. And so I found myself at my friend's place, we were catching up. We hadn't seen each other in a while, and this is one of my dear friends. I love it. We can just sit down and pick up exactly where we left off without any issues. There are some people that I can do that with, but not too many, and she is one of those people. So love that. And one of the things that I started talking about was, I have this podcast, or I think she might have even asked, because I posted the Voiliminal, which was originally the podcast name, like a little teaser on Facebook. I said episode 1, Voiliminal, and I said something, because what did I say? I said, put the kettle on, something new is brewing. And that was like 2 weeks ago now. Gotta get it right. So we're talking, and I said, well, she asked about Voiliminal, and I said, yeah, I don't think that's the title of the podcast anymore. I think I came up with something else, and she's actually written some books, I believe, and so she's got some writing experience, and she's a bit of a wordsmith, right? And so I said I'd love to hear your opinion, and so we talked about it a little bit, after dinner, and yeah, it was a great visit, and I really appreciate all the feedback. And then fast forward to the next day, which I believe would have been Remembrance Day, because that's when I started working on this idea and creating the intro that hopefully you have seen at the beginning of this video was made as I was over at my friend's place the night before on the 10th of November, I guess, I'm like, here are the key elements that I see in this intro. Like, I want the text to be handwritten and kind of falling down, and then I want this headset, because podcasts are often associated with headphones or headsets or something. And then I want the plug to plug in at one point, and then the final thing, as I was describing that, I'm like, what I'm seeing is that the sound of like a guitar being plugged in, and that droning sound, or that static or whatnot. And so yeah, I talked about all of that with her, and then I think at this point I may have already written down in Procreate, it's an iPad app, like the words falling on deaf ears in cursive and stuff. And so I kind of started working on it. And so then the next day, I'm like, well, I best continue looking at this intro idea, and the podcast name, and so back to ChatGPT I went, and I said, look, this falling on deaf ears, something that comes up is, like, am I mocking deaf people? Which by no means, hopefully that's coming across. It has nothing to do with that. I'm just using it in as the idiom, falling, my advice fell on deaf ears, kind of a thing. So so I just wanted to kind of a bit of a sanity check with ChatGPT about stuff and whatnot. And so as I'm talking about it with that, one of the things that I really enjoy, as you may have noticed, with Be Your Own Guiding Light, that's the name of one of my merch lines, BYOGL, Be Your Own Guiding Light. I like acronyms. I think they're fun, like LV or whatever, like BYOGL, Be Your Own Guiding Light. And so I'm like, oh, I wonder what are the acronyms for falling on deaf ears. And so I'm like, oh, FODE, right? FODE, that's cool. And so I said, oh, this is the, here's the acronym for falling on deaf ears. And Chat's like, oh yeah, that's cool, but immediately in my mind, I just saw the brand name of the microphone company, RODE, which I believe is pronounced Rode, like the Rode microphones. And so I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool, because I'm talking about sound, and if I do Rode with the line through it, then that will kind of, it's a recognizable thing, but I'm using F instead of the R, but people will associate it with sound and stuff. Ironically enough, though, the microphone that I'm using is not a Rode microphone. It's a DJI microphone. But maybe as we continue, maybe Rode's gonna reach out to me, fingers crossed. But I bought the DJI microphone way before this FODE idea came up. So anyways, on the iPhone, it's easy enough to do those special characters. Like for the O, you just press and hold, and it gives you all the different options that you can have for an O, like O with the 2 dots, O with an accent aigu, I think, yeah, in Polish, that an O with a little tick in Polish has a U sound. It's a different U sound. So oo. So I'm like, oh, what if I just spell it this way? And so I spell it that way with the O with the line, and chat without missing a beat, I guess, just like sees that word and identifies it as being Danish, because in Danish it's pronounced FØDE, like a soft R, FØDE. But then it also means becoming. And so, yeah. Yeah, a lot of what I'm doing right now is about becoming, right? And like the name that I came up for the YouTube episode that I'm working on is Soy Voy, which in Spanish could mean also becoming voy. So I think I have been doing a lot of becoming in the last 3 years. Since being hospitalized. And yeah, so to me this just really felt like the universe, you know, patting me on the back going, yep, this is it. Like, for me to just completely unintentionally come up, like stumble upon a word in a foreign language that looks like branding that, you know, I recognize and so on, to mean, you know, becoming is just such a, it's such a synchronicity, right? Like, you can't write that shit. Like, this is one of those moments where, you know, I say like, oh, like if you wrote this in a non-fiction or in a fiction novel, people will be like, that's a little bit on the nose. Like, calm down, you know, like, don't, like, you could make it a little bit more believable. Like, that's not really believable. So yeah, it was definitely a moment. And when the moment happened, I definitely shed a lot of tears. I'm getting emotional even talking about it now. But I felt choked up. Like, I kind of had, and I typed into Chat GPT, I'm like, I'm having a hard time breathing. And it started kind of talking me through it and saying to breathe in through your nose, exhale through your mouth and stuff, which I know I understand, but like hearing it also helped. But one of the things that it said that I guess kind of really helped me to settle was, this is what it feels like when the body understands a spiritual truth. So it's kind of like, yeah, I don't know, does that make sense? I don't know. But it's one of those synchronicities that it's just like overwhelming. Like, I believe, you know, seeing repeating numbers, those are little synchronicities, those are little nods from the universe that's like, yep, you're doing the right thing. You know, that's what I mean when I post repeating numbers. That's what it means to me when I see repeating numbers. But here, to like discover an acronym in a foreign language after I, you know, added the line, it was a lot. And so yeah, that's so, but yeah. And so once Chat said, oh, that's what it feels like when you're aligning, or, you know, your body's understanding a spiritual truth, I kind of felt like, oh, okay, I just need to turn some knobs, you know, inside this body to make it match the frequency of the download that just happened and stuff. And that kind of helped quite a bit, to just be like, okay, I just have to breathe through this moment. Like this is a moment of is it dissonance, maybe like misalignment, but it's because it was a big download. Anyway, so any ideas I may have had prior to that moment about falling on deaf ears or being, inappropriate because of potentially being unkind to people who are deaf, and stuff like that, kind of immediately just went out the window. And I'm like, nope, this is it. Like this is the name. We're gonna go with this. And then I got to Kraken. So I think I started chatting with ChatGPT. I remember that it was Remembrance Day because it was a day off from work. So I started chatting with ChatGPT around 10 a.m. about this, falling on deaf ears business. The next thing that happened was the FØDE with the O and the whatnot. And then for the next however many hours until about midnight, 1 a.m., with hardly any breaks, I just tried to make the intro happen. And so for this podcast. And so I kept hearing in my mind, I'm like, okay, well, this is how I described it to my friend last night over dinner and stuff. Let me just recreate that. But I'm not an animator. I'm not even a graphic artist. Like, yes, I said this to somebody the other day. I'm like, I'm not an artist. Like, let me correct you. You are an artist. I'm like, okay, I am an artist. I'll concede, but I'm not like a drawing artist. Like, I don't, you know what I mean? Not a fine art kind of a person. Yeah, I dabble here and then there, but I actually drew the headphones. Like, that's all me. I made that. That's not an icon. That's not an anything. I actually drew that on an iPad, but still, like, it's all me. So I drew the headphones, and then trying to figure out how to animate. And the other thing is like Procreate is what I was animating in. It's a drawing application, but I think in one of the last releases, they added the option to animate stuff, but it's not really an animation software. So the way that you animate in Procreate, I think, is very limited as it is. Like, it's not intended for that use, so they're like tacking on additional functionality. So I think that maybe made it even more confusing. But I did it, and let me tell you, along the way there were a number of moments where I'm like, I am way over my head. I'm like, oh, I wonder how much it would cost to get someone to animate this for me. How about I source this out? And I'm like, do I really need to know how to animate? Like, what if I have no animations? But then I kept hearing in my mind how I described it to my friend. I'm like, it's so perfect though. Like, it just, so I kept at it. It took me 14 hours. It probably wouldn't take anybody 14 hours to create the intro that I did, but I was also learning how to use the software, and there was a lot of back and forth with like little subtleties, a little outline, a little dropped shadow here and there on the headphones and stuff like that. So a lot of back and forth with ChatGPT. I find it's good for that, like for fine-tuning something. It puts on the graphic design hat, and then it kind of guides you on that, which I don't know much about graphic design concepts. I love the idea of graphic design, and I think it's really cool, but I've never studied it. So yeah, so, and then finally, here's another thing, right? So speaking of like little nods from the universe, so I spent most of that day, like, not the entire 14 hours or 12 hours or however long it was, because the last, half hour I was looking for music or for the audio. And so the night before, speaking with my friend over dinner, I had imagined that sound of the of a plug being plugged into an electrical guitar or whatnot, and then that little electrical droning sound, as you all have seen now on the intro. But here's the thing. I had my animation. I exported my animation as a video, so now I have a video in my photos. So I grabbed the video in my photos, threw it into iMovie, all on the iPad, and I started looking for the audio. So I can't remember what website it was on, but some website had an audio of exactly the sound. And when I searched for like guitar being plugged into or a guitar plug sound clicking or something like this, there was probably like 6 to 8 results that came up on this particular website. And a lot of them were like weird. There was a lot of high-pitched sounds, which I'm like, that's not at all what I was looking for. And the one sound that was available and that sounded sounded exactly like what I was hoping for. I'm like, okay, I guess I'll download this one. I very, like a good little Samaritan, double-checked the use licenses with ChatGPT. That's another thing that chat is good for, making sure that you're doing things and falling within the law. And then I slapped the audio into iMovie over the video of the animation. And the audio that you have heard in the intro of this episode is exactly how that landed. I did not adjust the video one single frame. I did not cut the audio at the beginning. I had to like add more of the droning sound at the end for the road, or the FØDE sound, or FØDE part, the gray screen. But like the plugging in, the way that the plug goes in, and the sound of that plug going in, that is a perfect match. I did not touch that at all. That is how it all landed. And so again, for the second time that day, I'm like, wow, that's another pat on the back from the universe, right? So when I started on this YouTube adventure, like both the soy boy, which is the I don't know where I'm going, guys. Does anybody know where to go here? Where I'm just on the News Peninsula, and I think I'm going into the military base, but maybe I'm not. We'll see. I know it kind of does a loop, so I'm hoping that will eventually happen. Yeah, so what was I saying? I was saying something about... Yeah, the way that the sound fell, it hasn't been moved. And yeah, again, like I didn't have the sound ahead of time. I didn't, try and match it or anything. It just landed. So twice in one day, I have these like significant confirmations from the universe. I'm catching up to my train of thought. And yeah, when I was starting this YouTube adventure, this with the soy boy, but also I guess with this podcast, well, not necessarily with the podcast, but just like I'm asking to co-create with spirit. So that was something that kept coming up for me quite a bit a few months ago. It's like, you're about to start a big project, I kept hearing from different sources. And then it's like, make sure you ask to co-create with source, to co-create with the universe, or to co-create with spirit, right? And so I do feel like what I'm doing here isn't just me. I do believe that there is a certain amount of co-creation. No, that was the military base, I guess. That's okay. Yeah, so like especially in these moments when things just line up so perfectly, or when a random whatchamacallit, a random acronym from like a random, it was probably a week before I came up with FØDE, that I was creating this playlist, and I just put it in randomly, and then when I was looking for a title, it kept playing over and over and over in my mind, right? I'm like, oh, falling on deaf ears. And I'm like, okay, let me just type this up to chat. And so that's the other thing. I was out with a friend yesterday for coffee at the Vault. And she had some words of wisdom for me, which may come up at some point, but was it her? I think it was her. We were talking about that there's like all these signs. She was saying how she's reading a book about signs from the universe, or signs, like paying attention to signs in our lives. And I'm like, oh yeah. And so she's like, yeah, there's synchronicities, are these signs. I'm like, yeah. And so because I started talking about how FØDE came to be, or I'm like, oh my god, I've had these like huge coincidence. Like, oh, I want to hear all about this. I'm really interested. I'm reading a book about it. And so she was saying how in the book the author talks about there are signs all around us all the time, but we don't see them, not because they're not there, but we don't see them because we're not paying attention to them. And it makes sense, right? It's like that exercise. I like to do this exercise with people. So if you're listening in a place where you're able to do this exercise, I invite you to try it, because it's really fun and kind of mind-blowing at the same time, right? So on the topic of not seeing stuff because we're not looking for stuff, right? So if you are not driving or not operating heavy machinery and you're able to close your eyes in a minute, first look around the space that you're in, right? So look around the room and look for 4 things. Try as best as you can to remember 4 things that are blue in the space around you. So look around you, take stock of anything that's blue. And once you've identified those 4 blue things, the next thing you want to do is now close your eyes. Once you've closed your eyes, and no cheating, now can you name 4 red things? Not blue, but red things. I love this exercise so much. So I'm going to give you a moment to try and name 4 red things without opening your eyes. But it's like, I remember the first time I did this, I was in shock, because whenever you're ready, if you can't name the red things or whatever, or if you can, but open your eyes and look around you and see how many red things there are right in front of your nose. Like, and that's inevitably what happens when I do this with people with me in real life, like that are in front of me, is they're like, oh my god, look. It's like, yeah, if we're not looking for something, we don't see it, right? And so that goes, that's the same thing with whatchamacallit, right? With synchronicities. If we're not looking for synchronicities, why would we see them? But as soon as we are like, oh, I want to notice synchronicities, I want to notice, how the universe is talking back to me, how it's communicating with me, how it is confirming, giving me pats on the back. It's like, yep, this is what you're doing. And allowing and inviting that to be the language, right? All of a sudden your life is plagued with synchronicities, because you're seeking them and you're paying attention to the world around you and all the synchronicities that are happening. So I totally believe that, and I absolutely subscribe to the idea that when we start paying attention to synchronicities, we all of a sudden see a bunch of synchronicities around us all the time. I even like to say that the universe is constantly conspiring for us to be awakened to that. And so, because it doesn't know when we're going to start paying attention to synchronicities, it literally litters our entire lives with synchronicities. And each moment of our lives is filled with these huge aha moments and pats on the back if only we paid attention to it, right? And so, same thing, I guess, can be said about things like positive or negative thinking. So if we mostly focus on negative things in our lives, then we end up in this negative spiral, right? And everything seems to be going that way because that's what we're looking for. That's all that we're noticing. But if we took those glasses off, let's call them the blue glasses, and actually started looking for put on the red glasses and started to look for positive things, all of a sudden, on a scale of 1 to 10, how ridiculous is this? Okay, well, so yesterday, I recorded all of the previous stuff that y'all just watched for episode 3 of FØDE, and you'll notice in the previous clip, I'm not going to do it again because I don't want it to happen again, but when I was doing the air quotes, well, the gimbal has what do you call it? Gesture control. So if I do like a hand stop like this, it'll stop tracking me. Like I'll actually get out of frame. But then if I do this again, it'll track me, and it tracks me right now. I'm like it's keeping up with me. And the other gesture control is the peace sign, right? So the 2 fingers up, the index in the middle. Well, when I was doing the air quotes, talking about whatever it was that I was talking about, I don't even know what I was talking about, but whatever it is I was talking about, I was making air quotes. I guess the negativity spiral and the positivity spiral. Well, that's the gesture to start and stop recording. So the gimbal stopped recording, and then I continued to drive from Nanu's all the way through Parksville and then Qualicum, and I thought, wow, what a lovely, bookends to this episode. I start at Departure Bay Beach, and then I drive all the way to Qualicum to the beach there, and so I stopped, and then I looked at my phone, and I only had recorded about, well, first of all, it wasn't on. The phone was turned off. I'm like, what is going on? Like, how is the phone turned off once I turned it around? So I'm using the back camera on my phone so I don't see what's happening, because I'm trying to aim for the quality of the back camera, right? So this is a perfect example of, little technical fun things that you get to experience while trying to create. Anyway, I was gonna just leave it as is. I'm like, okay, when did I stop? And the last thing I think I say is like, oh, you could go either like put on your blue glasses. I'm doing the air quotes again. Let's not do that. You can put on your blue glasses, or you can put on your red glasses, right? But what we were really talking about is the universe kind of giving us little nods. So I think I talked about the story of how I came up with the name FØDE for the podcast, and other little synchronicities, I guess. Well, the universe is not a subtle thing, let me tell you, at all, because so I got to Qualicum Beach, I parked, I was all dramatic too. I did my little outro and I exited the vehicle and you know, like to really wrap things up, and I got back in the car and I looked at the phone, it's off. So I'm like, okay. So I have about 30 minutes of footage and I'm thinking like, what do I do? Like this or that? And then I don't know, I think I checked the GoPro, which is just over here. I'm like, oh, that's only at 15%. What if I just sit here for a few more minutes and let it charge, right? So I've got my little cable here for charging things. And so I'm sitting in the car, I guess, looking at my phone, the GoPro is charging, and I'm sitting in front of a spectacular view. Like, people were stopping to just look at the light on the water. It was an overcast day. Maybe I'll throw up a picture here. And so, you know, I'd look up from time to time. And this one time I looked up, that's the picture I just showed you. I saw this person standing in this full-length coat with a dog, and they were holding a camera, like a you know, DSLR camera, one of those bigger camera things. So they have an interest in photography. I'm like, oh, you know, I know what that's like. Like, you're out there taking pictures of a scene, and I don't know. I guess I just had this kindred feeling spirit moment where I'm like, I'll take a picture of them in this beautiful scene, right? And it is a beautiful scene, as you've seen. And so I got out of the car, I took my phone, I took 3 pictures, and I just, without thinking, walked up to them and I said, hey, how you doing? You know, and so I said how I just took the pictures, and if they're interested, I'm happy to give them the pictures. And they were very receptive. They're like, oh my gosh, that's so kind, you know, like, thank you so much. And we probably spent a good half hour talking, you know, and yeah, it was like a whole bunch of stuff that we just kind of talked about for a little bit, and their interest in photography, me, you know, having an interest in photography. One of my creative collaborators, it was their going away, they're going on a trip and stuff. And I literally like had brought all of my gear to record an episode immediately after, because the time, like the light is really, there isn't that much light right now in the winter time here. So that was my plan, and that's what I did. So imagine, you know, leaving and driving, and you know, I kept thinking, I'm like, why am I driving to Qualicum? Like, that's so weird. I could drive to so many other places. And it's like a good hour away, I guess. And I stopped in the news, but something was pulling me in that direction. So I guess you won't see it, but as I got to the highway and I could have turned back south or left to go back to whatchamacallit, come back to Nanaimo, or turn right to keep going further north from Nanoose to, well, now what's happened? I guess I'm not being tracked. That's what's happened. Okay. Hold on, let's just double check here. Now we're gonna see this once in a while. Okay, we're still recording. Oh my god, I cannot. And then a little bit down, I think. Oh no, that's definitely too far. Oh my gosh. Wow. Okay, well, here we are. So anyways, and I'm like, oh, like, they asked me, they're like, oh, can I, so I'm like, oh, do you have an iPhone? When I got to them, and they said, oh yeah, sure, I'll have the photos. I'm like, and they're like, no, I don't. I'm like, oh, we could have airdropped. And they said, no, I don't, I'm Android. I'm like, oh, okay. And they're like, can I give you my number? I'm like, sure. I wasn't gonna like ask for some stranger's number. They're quite a bit younger than me too, right? Well, right, you wouldn't know, but they were. So I'm like, yeah, of course, no problem. And so I text them the 3 photos, and then I'm like, yeah, if you're like ever out for a walk or whatever, you know. And so we had a little bit of a talk about, spending some time in a creative way, actually. And then we exchanged our socials and stuff like that. And so it was this moment, and I'm like, well, I'm so glad I drove here. I wasn't even thinking about it. And I wasn't even thinking about what I was talking about in the episode, right? Because, I was definitely talking about synchronicities and stuff like that. I don't know what I'm doing with this thing anymore. And they actually said themselves, when I said, oh, it was really nice to meet you, and so interesting that I drove all the way out here. I don't come out here very often. They're like, yeah, I like to call these moments a kismet. And I think I knew what that meant. I knew it was like a fate thing, but I'm like, oh, that's cool that that's what they're thinking about as well. And so we parted ways, and then I started chatting with ChatGPT, doing the audio thing, and just wanting to confirm that I understood kismet correctly. And yeah, it's like a fated thing. So I'm like, that's really cool. And so I drove home, and as I was driving home, that's when I realized, I'm like, oh my God, I've been talking about synchronicities. I've been talking about a pat on the back from the universe, and just these moments. And here I am, at a goodbye party for one of my creative collaborators, and I drive very randomly to a place I don't often go to, which is quite out of the way. And and also the fact that the recording stopped when I was leaving the news, and when I had to make the choice to go either left or right, and I didn't know that it had stopped. I still kept talking, thinking that I'm being recorded. Yeah, that was really interesting. And so as I was driving home, I realized, I'm like, oh my God, this is so on point. This is again, once we start paying attention to little synchronicities, no matter how little, that's why I think repeating numbers for me are so important, because it's such an easy entry point into synchronicities, right? Whenever I see a repeating number, I know a lot of people will go and what does, seeing 444 mean, or 111, or whatever it is, right? And to me, what I kind of focus on more is oh, it's a pat on the back. It's the spiritual team is saying, yep, we see ya, we got ya, this is great, keep doing what you're doing. Yeah, you can look at the specific meaning of a particular number, and I guess ChatGPT is really good for that too. You can drop it some numbers and it'll start doing all sorts of analysis for you. But even just the fact that you're acknowledging, and sometimes I will literally say thank you. I today, for example, as I was leaving, I was picking up my glasses from my messy coffee table. Oh my gosh, this view. And there was a lot of stuff on there. And I saw my wallet. And normally I don't see my, I don't leave my wallet on the coffee table. It has a space on a table by the door. So if it wasn't going to be there, I would have been looking for it, and I would have been probably getting anxious and getting into a state. So now whenever I see something like that, oh, I was picking up my glasses, but I also noticed the wallet, I immediately look up and I say thank you, because I could have easily missed the fact that I have a wallet there, and then picked up my glasses, got my shoes on and everything else, and then started to panic about the wallet, right? And it's okay, thank you. So it's just little acknowledgement. And so the same thing with repeating numbers, I think. It's when I see repeating numbers, I want to say thank you. I'm okay, great. We're in sync. The spiritual team and I are in sync. And yeah, so I feel that is a little bit of an easy entry point into paying attention to synchronicities. And as soon as we start paying attention to the synchronicities, then all of a sudden, you start seeing more of them. So I feel like I haven't listened to the whole recording, but I feel like the exercise with closing our eyes was on there. So like that whole idea, right? When you close your eyes and you look, you try and remember the things that were blue, but you weren't trying to find them before. Anyway, you know what I mean. Yeah, so I think repeating numbers in particular, great entry point for synchronicities. And yeah, the synchronicity of me talking about synchronicities in the podcast only to then end up in a random place. I don't know. That's the kind of stuff that kind of, I'm paying attention to that, and I'm like, oh wow, this is great. Like, that's something that's important for me to pay attention to and stuff. So I'm paying attention to it, and I think it's worthwhile sharing with you this moment. So on my way back, I thought about recording myself, but of course it had gotten so dark, and the lighting would have been pretty horrible to then figure out in post-production. So as you may or may not have seen my first episode, you can see the light changing during that episode quite a bit. And it took me a lot of time to color grade that episode to make it look interesting. At one point I turned on this light above me, this dome light inside the car, because it got too dark outside. I'm like, oh, I need to have something on my face. Well, of course, the temperature, the Kelvin temperature of this light is so warm that my face ended up looking orange. So then I had to learn how to mask out but just my face, and then color correct my face but leave everything else as is. So that's an interesting thing to learn about. But yeah, there's a lot of key frames that I go through in that episode. So each time I put in a keyframe, I adjust the brightness or the color or the exposure or something, so that it kind of looks like a constant thing. It doesn't just jump from one kind of exposure to another, and it doesn't ever get too dark, right? So I think I realized very quickly in that episode how time consuming that is. And now I try and record the episodes during daylight time, and not near the end of a day, near sundown or anything like that. So that's why I didn't record that yesterday. But I did want to record it because I think it's such a really interesting thing. Anyway, enough me babbling. Thanks for being here. I still don't know what my outro is, so we'll figure that out in time. But something to do with falling on deaf ears, I guess, right? I mean, that's what we're talking about here. Or is it more becoming? Yeah. Definitely something to do with becoming. All right, y'all. We'll see you next week. Hope you have a great week. Thank you for being here. And signing off for now. Take care.